Are you worried that if you spend too much early in retirement, you won't have enough to cover long-term care? You can risk being a burden on your family, but if you wait too long to spend your money, you'll miss out on the chance to enjoy your healthiest years. So in this video, I'll show you what the new data shows on how retirees are actually spending, and how you can spend confidently in your 60s without risking your future security. Okay, so what's this new data and what does it mean for your retirement? So back in 2014, researcher David Blanchett popularized the retirement spending smile. His research found that retirees don't spend the same amount each year. Spending is usually higher early in retirement, lower in the middle, then higher again late in life, mostly because of healthcare. And if your retirement plan assumes that late life jump, you'll feel like you have to spend less in your 60s just in case your healthcare costs spike later on. But JP Morgan recently analyzed banking and credit card data across millions of retired households and found a pattern that was surprisingly different. Instead of a smile, it looked like this. The same higher spending early on, then it drops with age. But at the end of retirement, spending doesn't pick back up. It mostly stays flat. So across millions of households' data, the typical late life rise in spending doesn't show up the way the classic smile suggests. But if spending doesn't spike late, what about the healthcare costs that are supposed to make up the last part of the smile? So the late retirement spending spike most people are worried about is really the risk of long-term care. Home care, assisted living, or a nursing home. And that fear is real because it can be incredibly expensive and nobody knows ahead of time what kind of care they'll need. But the US Department of Health and Human Services looked at real consumer data, and they found that 52% actually did not spend a dollar on paid long-term care over their lifetime, while 48% did. But that's misleading because for the people who did have paid care, the costs weren't all the same. The study broke them into three groups. First is the low-cost group. These are people who spent $30,000 or less on care, and that was about 26% of people. Then there's the middle group, people who spent between $30,000 and $300,000, and this was actually the largest group at 44%. And finally, the high-cost group, those who spent $300,000 or more was about 30%. So the truth is that not everyone gets a big long-term care bill. It's that most people pay a more manageable amount, while a smaller group can get hit with very high costs. But I know what you're thinking. It doesn't matter if it's only a small number of people, because what if it's me? And that's exactly why I need a plan that protects you from long-term care risk without making you feel like you have to hold back on your lifestyle in your 60s. So think about it like this. You wouldn't protect your house from a hurricane the same way you would from a small leak in the basement. And long-term care works the same way. You don't know which version you'll face, small, medium, or massive. So you build protection in three levels. Level 1 is a few $1,000s here and there for extra help around the house, small assistant, or out-of-pocket items Medicare doesn't cover. And for this, you don't need a fancy strategy. Just set aside a few $1,000s per year in your retirement budget as a safety net. Then level 2 is the most common paid care scenario. And even if it's not the most expensive, tens or even a couple $100,000 over time still feels scary. But the good news is you've got two levers you can pull to cover those costs, and neither one requires a big cut to your spending or your lifestyle. Lever number 1 is a long-term care reserve. This is a bucket of money you don't plan on touching unless you need care. And setting aside enough to cover a couple $100,000 in costs might sound like a lot, but here's what the numbers actually look like. So let's say you want $300,000 available for care. Well, most people don't incur these costs until their early 80s. So if you want $300,000 set aside by age 82, you need to set aside about $110,000 at age 65, assuming a 6% rate of return. And sure, that's not cheap. But if you don't expect to be able to save an additional $110,000 before age 65, that's okay. Because you can combine whatever savings you do have with lever 2, which is your home equity. By the time they're in their 80s, most retirees have a home that's paid off and worth more than when they retired. So if your liquid assets are running low, home equity can be a backup source. You can sell the home or use a line of credit to help cover care costs. And I know this can be an upsetting idea, but if you're facing $300,000 in care costs, that often means you need a level of care where you're moving into assisted living or a care facility. So at that point, most retirees end up selling their home anyway. Plus, selling doesn't just unlock the home's value. It can also eliminate property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, freeing up monthly cash flow to help pay for care. So even when the numbers start to feel scary, a dedicated care reserve plus home equity as a backup plan can cover a lot of the risk. And by building this into your plan, you can enjoy your money in your healthiest years instead of constantly worrying that you're going to run out. But what makes retirees really hold back is level 3, needing $300,000 plus in lifetime long-term care costs. And this may only happen for around 1 in 10 people, but if you have a family history of Alzheimer's or any other risk factor, you can't ignore it. So how do you do this without being forced to underspend for decades trying to save for it? Well, there's three safety nets that you can use. Number one is to buy insurance. It's built for this exact situation. Most people never face a massive bill, but a small group does. And there are a lot of different options, so ask your insurance agent about what works best for you. But one example is a hybrid life insurance policy that also covers long-term care. If you need care, you can use the benefit while you're alive. If you don't, it passes to your heirs. Safety net number two is self-insuring, but in a tax-smart way. And by using the right vehicles, your dollars may go a lot further than you think. One way is through HSA money. Long-term care can be a qualified expense, so you can use HSA dollars tax-free. Another lever is the tax break for large medical expenses, and this works in retirement, not just during your working years. Under today's laws, you can deduct any medical expenses that exceed 7.5% of your total income. So if you have very high care costs and you're pulling from an IRA to pay for them, those deductions can lower your taxable income, meaning you pay less in taxes and your IRA dollars can go further. Then safety net number three is your last resort, which is Medicaid. It's never a first choice, but if you truly spend down your assets, Medicaid can step in and cover care. And with certain estate planning strategies, your accounts don't always need to be nearing zero to get assistance. So yes, these costs can be a lot, but you don't plan for them by piling up cash and living small your entire retirement. Between leveraging insurance, tax strategies for self-funding, and being aware of government assistance, you can protect against the worst case without sacrificing your best years. But the thing is, if you don't have a plan for what you'll do the next time the market crashes, you'll never actually feel safe spending your money. So watch this next, where I'll show you how to build an investment portfolio that works in any market.